Through my mother, developed a great respect for the role of nurses, for the work of nurses. My father was a surgeon, a very capable individual, finished medical school in 3 years, undergraduate school in 3 years, was a board certified surgeon by the age of 28. So I understood from my parents that focus on quality, but my parents were both role models in terms of their experiences as care providers as well. My father, he would carry around on vacations and wherever he went his medical bag, and it was just amazing to have a father where whatever might happen of the health status in the family, my father could readily solve the problem. In the medical school, I was an acting intern at Charlotte Memorial Hospital as a fourth-year medical student. And I was called to the emergency room early one morning to see an African-American gentleman in his mid-30s. He'd been signed out by the neurosurgeon who seemed rather hurried and didn't seem to be very interested in my assessment of the patient. So doing what a medical student's supposed to do, or what any physician's supposed to do, I sat down with this gentleman and took a very careful history and did a very careful physical exam. I was pretty sure that this gentleman had a treatable neurological condition called a Arnold-Chiari malformation, which is a malformation involving the base of the skull that with decompression of the base of the skull, these symptoms will resolve. So I tried to obtain the necessary diagnostic test to make the diagnosis at Charlotte Memorial Hospital. This gentleman had limited financial resources, and I couldn't convince people at the hospital to commit the resources to doing a magnetic resonance imaging study. If I called the attending, who was professor of neurology at the University of North Carolina, about the case, and I shared with him my findings, and he was sufficiently impressed with my description that he thought it was worth having this gentleman travel from Charlotte to Chapel Hill, and he would see him, and also he would do he would think about whether or not a magnetic resonance imaging study is necessary. So he ultimately saw him. He did the imaging study. It showed the classic malformation associated with Arnold-Chiari syndrome. Had a neurosurgeon at the University of North Carolina operate on him, and this gentleman's symptoms subsequently resolved over the ensuing several weeks after surgery. And while I was at Mayo, I noticed a photo of W.J. Mayo and a quote taken from him in the early 1900s, where he said that the only interest to be considered is the interest of the patient. And that really struck me because that really seemed to be kind of the kind of environment where I really wanted to pursue additional training in the environment which I really wanted to take care of patients. And I think what I noticed in that experience in Charlotte, North Carolina, there seemed to be other things that were driving the evaluation of that particular patient. The neurosurgeon was a private neurosurgeon. This was a patient who had no financial resources. And I thought, if everyone had just thought about the interest of this patient, then probably at a much earlier stage, his condition would have been recognized. So I had that individual aha moment, patient care experience that it's not only compassionate caring, but it's also high level of professional competence that that each of you bring to your work every day that allows you to do what you do for the people we serve. The second part of my experience at UNC was really at a population level. So I was on this somewhat lonely journey. Today, probably about 30% of the UNC medical students do degrees in the School of Public Health. Out of class of 160, I was the only person that took a walk across the street over to the School of Public Health. My classmates wondered, David, what does this have to do with being a doctor? I said, well, I think this taking care of an individual patient is important, but we need tools to take care of groups of patients, and that's what I'm trying to do. And so I had this experience in my master's thesis where I worked with Ed Wagner, who ran the Robert Johnson Clinical Scholars Program at UNC at the time. And what we found was that the African American patients who had the most severe blood pressure, they were the least likely to be treated with aggressive pharmacotherapy, and they were the least likely to receive follow-up appointments documented in the medical record. So we then try to develop some interventions to improve care, but candidly, that whole setting of trying to work from an academic setting at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill and intervene in care in Eastern North Carolina was really very challenging. And it certainly led me to go to a place like the Mayo Clinic, which not only had the sort of intellectual thought leadership in healthcare, but also was a very large provider of care for people. So, Baylor Scott and myself, we've embraced these 6 aims articulated by the Institute of Medicine in its 2000 report, Crossing the Quality Chasm. And, those aims apply at a traditional medical care level, but they also apply with respect to health behaviors, personal health. So, in the Juanita Craft Institute, we have community health workers who help people with identifying what motivates them, in leveraging those motivational triggers to achieve the health goals that they identify for themselves. There, for example, if you think about patient safety, what we provide there is we provide a safe place for people to exercise in a community that has the highest homicide rate, the highest rate of violent crime anywhere in Dallas. So we renovated a school, and there's exercise equipment, there's space there for people in that community to come, know they'll be safe while they're pursuing healthy behaviors and exercise. We also have things like, we have a kitchen there for people to learn how to cook healthy foods. So, I see this connection of traditional health care and personal health behaviors really coming together. For my own situation, I really benefited from those programs. And maybe just a brief story, in October of 2014, my wife and I were reflecting on our lives, so we thought, why don't we go to Rome, where we were married in 1986, and why don't we run the April 3rd, 2016 Rome Marathon? My situation is I've got a long journey. I weighed 243. And while my blood pressure was great, my lipids were great, I realized that my knees were not likely to survive all that training for the marathon. So I set personal goals, took my iPhone and laid out, and by I think April 1st, 2016, I want to get down to 169. I made it down to 201. Probably ate a little bit too much pasta in Italy over the last week or so. And my iPhone says I'm supposed to be 200 by July 1st. So I've got some work to do over the next couple of weeks here. As part of this training for the marathon, I hope that I can get to the point where I'm actually healthy enough and I'm physically fit enough that I can now train with my wife. She's probably at least 30 minutes to an hour better than me right now over 26 miles. So I need to pick up my game between now and April 3rd if I'm going to be seeing any of her in the 26.2 miles of the Rome Marathon. But I've been able to do this by participating in the Thrive program, being part of a larger group, using the Thrive resources to help set goals and to focus on healthy eating and additional exercise. I started doing yoga about 2.5 years ago because I realized that I really needed to work on my flexibility. And it's been delightful. I remember one particular poignant moment after a class or in the yoga locker room. The guy says, you're the stiffest person I've ever seen in a yoga class. So I said, yeah, that's about right. The yoga experience is challenging because I think as we get older in life, maybe we gravitate towards things that we do well because we get reinforced related to that. The yoga instructors have commented about my 40-pound weight loss over the last 6 months, and they've asked me, could they put on their website, the Sunstone Yoga website, a story about my journey to help motivate others. And I think we each within our accountable care organization have the opportunity to role model behaviors that will help us achieve our health goals, but also reduce our healthcare costs. we have this opportunity to improve the care for our patients at an individual level, a population level, this opportunity to the extent possible to be role models for others. But the other thing that we need to understand is that the work that we do every day, the creativity that we apply to our work in developing new tools to solve problems, the world is interested in those tools. They're interested in taking our lessons learned, our insights, and applying them to improve care elsewhere. So, our communities expect us to lead. The world expects us to lead. And, everyone's watching, everyone's looking to us for leadership. And what you do every day, it has tremendous importance for the individual patient for whom you might be caring, or a particular individual patient case where you're reviewing for care, for optimizing care transitions, care coordination. But you need to be thinking about that in the broader context of what are the learnings from this that would extend broadly from that patient to a broader range of patients, and people like Annette Myers and I and others want to be working with you to take the phenomenal things that you do every day and bring them to the world. Because I really came to Baylor, Scott, when I helped Baylor Healthcare System in '99 to assume my new role in 2013. Sure, to improve the care for the communities we serve, but I'm here to